Okay, we're here today with the lovely Maria Wheatley, the lovely Amy, and the lovely Brien Foerster. Hello, guys.
Hello. Hello,
Hi
everyone.
Karen, thanks for having me.
Cool. So, we've come together today. We're going to talk to Brien Foerster a little bit. But with me and Maria, we went to a long barrow a few weeks ago, didn't we, Maria?
That's right, we went to the largest long barrow in Northwest Europe where we investigated on military land. As I showed you, Karen, on the Salisbury Plain, I took you to there, and with my research, it showed that there was a long-skulled woman that was originally interned into the long barrow, but certain changes had taken place since I had last visited. When I last visited, as long as there wasn't a red flag flying, which means you can't enter the area because it's military activity being conducted on the Salisbury Plain, you could access the long barrow, but when I took Karen there, it is now a no-go zone.
Yeah.
Whether it's a red flag flying or not, it said no entry.
Yeah.
Wow.
And also, Brien, Maria told me, I didn't know this, that military bases are always stuck around specific sites. They're not to protect us, they're to keep us from knowing the truth. There's always army bases around Stonehenge, around these long barrows. Is that what it's like abroad when you go? Is there a big military base right next to the pyramids? Do you find that quite alarming, though, that all these army barracks are there?
Well, it's a nuisance more than anything else. And yeah, there are lots of military bases around the Giza area. And there's an ancient site called, what's it called? Zayat El Arian, which is an ancient pyramid with a subterranean complex, which is surrounded by military base. Nobody's been allowed non-military in there for 50 or 60 years.
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't realise that. Maria told me that.
And also what we noticed about the long barrow, it was completely in wire mesh as well. So what the military have done to
Yeah, and
that
of course
long
the
barrow,
Dashur.
Oh, I see. We've got a tiny weeny bit of delay here. That's a tiny bit. We've just got a bit of delay. Sorry, Maria, finish what you were saying, and then Brien can answer.
I was just saying what the military have done as well on the long barrow, and bear in mind this is a sacred site and sacred place, as well as an archaeological sensitive site. They've completely enmeshed it in wire all the way down the length, all the way down the side, like some kind of strange parody cage.
Which makes it a Faraday cage, doesn't it? That's what you were saying.
Well, I like a Faraday cage for sure.
So what do you think they did? So they just don't want any of the energy coming out, basically.
Well, I mean, they are saying it's for erosion purposes, but there was no erosion slippage on that barrow, and hundreds of people stand on the West Kennet long barrow, and there is still no erosion slippage. A handful of people rather stand on that long barrow, and suddenly there's erosion slippage. I don't believe it was for erosion purposes.
You told me that they drove the tanks over it.
Originally, yes, they did. Not just over that long barrow on the Salisbury Plain, but on other barrows on the Salisbury Plain as well.
And also, they've actually covered them up because they put tanks there, which would have gone over them, and people would have just thought, "Oh, look, that's where they drive the tanks over," not realising that they're long barrows. Anyway, we had a good day that way, and it was really strange that there was trees at the end of it, at both ends of it, wasn't there?
Yeah, that's what the Victorians used to do to cover up pagan sites, whether it was round barrows, long barrows, the entrance to Avebury, the exit to Avebury. They planted trees, normally beech trees, to disguise the monument. So it was a deliberate planning by the late Victorians.
When we were on top there, you said that there was loads of barrows around, didn't you?
Surviving long barrows in the Stonehenge environs alone. And there's over 2,000 in Wiltshire.
Wow. Yes, you two are uncovering
Wow.
all the elongated headed people, aren't you?
Yes, that's right. Obviously, Brien is well known for his work in Arrakis and in other locations worldwide.
Sorry, we can't hear you, Maria. We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Known for his research into the Arrakis long-headed people, as well as other ancient sites worldwide.
What, the elongated headed people were white, you mean?
No, I didn't say they were white. I said Brian's investigated them.
Oh, right. Okay, sorry. Just misheard that. Yeah, he's done masses of work on it, haven't you, Brian? Brian, you've been putting a load of pictures out lately, haven't you, on YouTube?
Well, I can't really go anywhere, so I've been having to make videos and post pictures and things like that.
Yeah, a bit frustrating then if you can't go anywhere.
Yeah, well, luckily Peru is coming out of this whole COVID thing, so I'll be allowed or able to travel to Cusco in the next week or two if I want to go, which is good.
Yeah.
Well, they've just announced here that we're going into a 3-stage lockdown here. We don't really want to talk much about that, but that's what they're doing in the UK. They're going to lock us down again over. Anyway, we won't talk about that. I've got some questions here. How did you two get into the elongated headed people then? Just you found them or history? What got you into doing what you're doing?
Well, I kept seeing photographs of of these skulls on TV when I was growing up, and I thought they were quite curious. And then I saw my first one, a mummified head here in Paracas, Peru, about 13 years ago. And just coming from a biological pre-med kind of background, I just thought that's very odd, the shape and complexity of them. And so I looked through the academic papers and there was almost nothing written about them, which I found very strange. So I just took it upon myself to explore the phenomenon.
Yeah, last year or maybe the year before now, you put out, didn't you? Obviously, these elongated headed people are subhuman.
They're probably a subspecies.
Did we, Maria? You said that we actually probably married them and were with them, but then somehow maybe we killed them off.
No, I think in England, which is a bit different situation to Caracas and Peru. It seems that that they could, in the north of England, you must realise that in the south of England you have major ancient sites like Stonehenge and Avebury. And if you go further north to places like Derbyshire, you have other large sites like Arborough, which is called the Stonehenge of the North, for example. And in the evidence for the mixing of the long-skulled people with the beaker culture, which had round skulls that came to the British shores in 2500 BC, for example, probably intermarried there, and there was no violence against one another because they were living side by side and they were being buried side by side. So the further north that you go in the British Isles, there's a different story to the southern story, which is that there was a lot of evidence in southern England, especially around Stonehenge, that there had been some conflicts because a lot of the long-skulled people were found with head wounds in the long barrows by antiquarians and by later archaeologists as well. So there's kind of different chapters, different stories wherever you go, and similar in France actually. So I think we need to look at each place and each region with its own merit. And just like London is different today to where I live, which is a 12th century market town not far from Avebury, there's a different subculture going on. So I think it was like that in the Neolithic. And the Chalcolithic, the Copper Age, because it was that Copper Age around about 2480 BC, where you get all of these transitions and the beaker culture coming over.
So the elongated headed people were here first then?
In the Neolithic period in the British Isles, yes.
Is that what you find the same, Brien? It's the same. You have the same answer as Maria.
Well, Maria has been my teacher about the phenomenon in England, so I defer to her expertise about the time periods there. But again, it was very curious to be able to go inside the Stonehenge complex with her. Thanks to her influence, we were allowed to go right inside and be within like half an inch of the stones, making sure we didn't touch them because we would get told off if we did that. But just the story she told me of the age of the complex and dependent radiocarbon studies that have been done shed a lot of light on the true age of Stonehenge. Again, the magic figure we keep being told is 2500 BC for everything, and she had, thanks to another researcher, radiocarbon evidence that Stonehenge is at least 10,000 years old, and it was two perfect circles, which when you're there and you look at it, you see that makes complete logical sense, because when it was reconstructed, they obviously had no plan as to what it originally looked like. So that was a very illuminating experience.
Yeah.
Was there two circles at Avebury as well, Maria?
There was three at Avebury, and they're just finding now with what's called LIDAR and various other means like geophys that you had a very large outer circle at Avebury, two inner circles, but now it's known that you also had linear lines linking certain parts of the monument. And like I said to Brien, and I'm sure Brien is very well aware with his research in Egypt and far, far beyond, that it is a spoon-fed date 2500 BC. That's the archaeological model. And it does seem that Avebury could, and Stonehenge and other sites, especially in the north of England and Ireland and France, could really, really predate that anyway to at least 10,000 BC. And what's been recently found around Stonehenge is a huge area of very deep pits. So if you imagine you've got a place called Durrington Walls, which was a super henge. It was far, far bigger than Avebury. And Durrington Walls was where the people originally lived when they built Stonehenge. And you have now a much older causewayed enclosure built by the long-skulled people, predating that by 1,000 years. And using Lark Hill, if you drew a huge circle with around that area, then you have these pit monuments that have just recently been found. And some of the pit monuments are 65 feet wide by 16 feet deep. I mean, these were huge structures. What were the ancients up to there is something that is being explored by archaeologists and alternative researchers alike.
You told me that in the Lbry complex there, well, by Avebury, that there was more pyramids there originally, didn't you, Maria?
There were three major mounds within a few miles of one another. There was what's called the Hatfield Barrow, which was another super henge called Marlinhenge, which is in the middle of Avebury and Stonehenge, very significantly placed right in the esoteric center of those two huge henges anyway. So Marlinhenge was massive. It was really huge. It had sweat lodges, stone circles. It was a bustling place in the Neolithic and the Bronze Ages. And that too had a very large mound. And in my hometown, you have what's called Merlin's Mount, which is a Neolithic mound, just like Lbry. Yes, so there was three major mounds.
I found out that all the big schools. I mean, obviously it's Marlborough College, but Eton and Harrow and all these, they've got mounds in as well.
That's right. A lot of that research was done by a lady called Susan. Her second name escapes me at the moment, but she looked into the relationship mounds play within public school, and they are there. Even if you go to Oxford, you have a large Motte and Bailey just outside of the university.
Yeah, I think there's mounds everywhere, isn't there? They're even in castles. If you go to Windsor, I think it's Windsor Castle, there's Dover Castle, there's other castles, they've all got mounds in them.
That's called a Motte and Bailey, which was from the Norman era, Karen.
So
They're not necessarily prehistoric, but they are from the 10th century onwards.
right, so those are aged differently. Right, okay.
Yeah.
They were still building mounds though, weren't they?
Yes, but for more fortification with a big ditch around it so that you could have a drawbridge going across it.
Right, so those mounds are different. Anyway, I just want to explain, you and Brien are really good friends, aren't you?
Yes, I met Brien at Contacting the Desert, and like I said, at Stonehenge, and we plan to do some tours together in March.
Yeah, just right for the lockdown, which is a bit annoying, isn't it? So you two talk to each other quite a lot then, don't you? Because obviously you're studying or looking at the same kind of things, aren't you? Just in different countries.
Oh, we share a lot in common, yes.
Hmm. So what have I got? Some questions here. Done that one. Yeah, I'm just looking at my questions. Brien and even Maria, you now see that timelines and things are different to you've been told, haven't you? Do you go out, when you go to a site, do you ever think it's in what they say it is, or do you think that it's all different to what we've been told? Well, that was for Brien, really. Brien. You there, Brien? So yeah. Do you have your own timeline on things, or because obviously they give us a timeline, but there's a different timeline, isn't there? Everything's not as it seems, is it?
Well, I think the megalithic sites are around the world are mainly pre-cataclysmic, so 13,000.
Sorry? Sorry, Brien, we didn't get the end of the sentence. Maybe he's muted himself and not realised. This doesn't look muted. I can't see if I don't know if he's muted or not. He's there, but I don't see him muted, because obviously one of my icons, because I'm on twice, one to record and one to talk, you can see I'm muted on one of mine, the little things up, but I don't see he's muted. You might find that he lost connection and he'll be back.
I bet that's what it is, how that happens to me sometimes.
Okay, well, until Brien returns, what I think Brien was leading up to is that a lot of sites can be looked at as being much older than what we are spoon-fed, which again is that magic number 2500 BC. And some of them can be, going back to as much as 13,000 BC. And our old friend Karen, John Cowie, who wrote Lbry Dawning, the late and great John Cowie, we both knew him. What a lovely chap. For sure. But one of his carbon dating from inside of Lbry Hill, chalk pyramid, as John always described it, as we know, and that was 12,000 BC for Lbry Hill alone. So if we took John Cowie's dating rather than the orthodox dating, then it goes quite close to what Brien was just about to say with 1300 BC. And I don't know if Brien's back now to finish that off.
Damn, we get him on a hangout and that. Oh, there we go. He lost his internet.
It's his internet.
Okay. Well, until Brien comes back, then I really think Brien should speak for some time, because he's missed out a lot and hasn't said much, and I'm very conscious of that. So until Brien comes back, when we have a look at these ancient sites worldwide, for example, we need to question who built them, why they were built, and what date they were built. And there are three fundamental questions that archaeologists have failed to address fully and truthfully. So when we look at the early Neolithic monuments, that's the long barrows, what's called cursus monuments, and causeway enclosures. They were built by the long skulled people. They're the really ancient sites in the British Isles and Europe. And at a later date, the round circles, the stone circles by the round skulled people were being built. So when we look at a monument like Stonehenge or Avebury, we really need to think it's been built by two cultures. It hasn't been built by one culture. Why is that? If we look at the central feature of Avebury, there's two stone circles called the northern and the inner stone circle, surrounded by the great stone circle of 100 standing stones. But the central features of the two inner circles predate the circles. So they're really ancient, they're Neolithic, and the round stone circles came later. So really what's going on is different cultural identities looking at one place as sacred and adding to it. So the central features were phase one at Avebury, the cove stones, the obelisk stone. And the obelisk stone was a huge stone standing 21 feet tall. 500 to 600 years later came the stone circles. So it's a really vast timeline anyway. And I truly think that even places like Avebury go back way back to the to what we would call the Mesolithic period, the Middle Stone Age, 10,000 BC. And I don't know if you'll be able to message Brien to see if he can get back on.
Yeah, I will. I'll message him.
Karen.
Is everything all right? Maria, can I ask you something? When you're
Oh.
looking at those stones, were they something else, and were they crystals before? And then they've well, he's online on Facebook. Just say, are you okay?
So come on and talk about, finish off your from 1300 13,000 BC. That was his last word.
You might be just having a bit of an internet problem. Sometimes you can be on Facebook, but
Right.
not be able to do anything, even though you're showing that you're on. Do you think that they were something else? You know,
When we look,
they've petrified.
not with Sarsen stone from Stonehenge and Avebury and other stone circles in the southwest of England, because it's a form of sandstone. So long before it was solid, it was sand. And that's why you get at Avebury and more Avebury than Stonehenge, like little pits in the standing stones and holes, because that was the root of palm trees when originally it was sand. And over time, because of huge geological changes, it becomes compressed into a form of sandstone. And that's what Sarsen is. That makes up Avebury and Stonehenge. The huge stones at Stonehenge. The smaller ones are from Wales, and they're called a dolerite stone, a blue stone. And they came from about 170 miles away from Stonehenge.
Yeah. So they brought the stones there, you reckon?
Well, they've now found the geologists and archaeologists and teams from universities that they have found the location of where the blue stones came from. And Brien's back, so he can sort of carry on what he was talking about.
Brian's back.
So I'll leave Brian to talk about where he was going.
I don't know what to say now. Brian!
That's such a shame, because Brien is so knowledgeable to add to such a great variety of different sites worldwide. And Brien looks into the ancient technology, the real core of what was happening at ancient sites. So it's such a shame that we have been devoid of his wisdom.
Oh, no, yes.
Are you there, Brian?
Sorry about that. I'm back now.
Hey!
Yay!
Yay! Please carry on, Brien, while we've got you.
Yeah, I'm here, but the audio quality is absolutely awful.
We can hear you okay.
Yes.
Okay, that's good. I had to reboot the whole system, so
Oh.
sorry for that delay.
That's okay. You were saying, carry on from what you were saying.
I forget where I was.
Maria, what was he saying?
You were saying, Brian, that some of the sites were going back to, and then you said 13,000 BC, and then we cut off. We couldn't hear what you said thereafter.
Okay, well, the theory is that there was a series of cataclysms that happened during the Younger Dryas period, which was around 13,000 to 12,000 years ago, and that these megalithic sites would have been created before that time period because obviously they don't fit the timeline of standard archaeology of the 2500 BC thing. We have no evidence of any cultures we know of that were capable of doing that kind of work more recently. So these would be pre-cataclysmic cultures that would have created these megalithic locations in Peru and Bolivia and Egypt and possibly Stonehenge and who knows, Karnak and Petra in Jordan, Baalbek in Lebanon, Egypt, etc. And the other interesting thing is that the most sacred sites that we know of are lined almost exactly to north, south, east, and west. But in locations, especially in Egypt, we find that quite a few of the megalithic ones are 23.5 degrees off of north, south, east, and west, which would suggest that the axis of the Earth had changed over the course of time, probably during this cataclysm period. And that's backed up by many other researchers who are looking at this stuff now in terms of alignments.
Is that all to do with the electromagnetics in the place we live, Brien?
I think that the pole physically shifted, and that's why these are off by 23.5 degrees, and that's why our planet is off by 23.5 degrees now. So at Karnak, the central core, which is the megalithic part of it, it's all granite, basalt, and quartzite construction. The Holy of Holies there, which is the ancient ceremonial walkway, is 23.5 degrees off north, south, east, and west. We find the same thing at the Ramesseum, which is pretty well close by. So I think that's a good indication that the pole physically shifted. And of course, that would have messed up all of the electromagnetic stuff in terms of ley lines, et cetera, too, if they were from that time period.
Right. But they're not all the same ages, are they, these structures, are they? They're all different ages then.
Yeah, I would think so, and made by different cultures. Some people talk about one global work, and I don't think so. I think there were different cultures. They could have been content with one another, or others could have been older than others. But that's why I say 13,000 plus years, but we can't say when exactly.
No, it seems a bit strange when we're in 2020 and we think we're so wonderful and everything's fixed, when actually we don't actually understand most of our history, do we?
Well, that's why we do what we do, because we don't get the answers from academia, so who are basically covering the stuff up and ignoring it. So we have to present it to the public in any way we can. And I think YouTube is the most effective way of doing that.
Yeah, you have quite a few subs on your channel, don't you, Brien?
I've got 1,500 videos now.
Cool.
Wow.
Yeah, well done.
Yes.
But people, you because of who you are and the fact I think you take tours and that, you probably get to see a lot more than most of us, don't you?
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. Also, a lot of people don't realise there's like a tunnel underneath the pyramids, isn't there, in Egypt?
Oh, there's a whole series of tunnels.
Was that because they were living down there, or they were more like, say, for like canals and things like that?
Well, they seem to have built underground on purpose. 85% of ancient Egypt is still underground. It hasn't been, it's not under the sand. It's actually in the bedrock. So I've been to a site called the Osiris Shaft, which is on the Giza Plateau, and you descend into the bedrock 200 feet underground, and there's a pool of water in a large stone box at the bottom. It's probably interconnected with other
Hello?
but of course, locked. The authorities have locked most of those behind metal doors so that the public can't see them, but gradually they're opening these things up, which is great.
Does that mean they built on top of them, or they were built for the pyramids?
Well, the dynastic people's work is all about, there's another pretty famous site called the Osiris, which was built on purpose underground because of it, and you look down into it. And I was there in March. I had it to myself for half an hour because of local influence, and it's a very complex system of tunnels that you can explore.
Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, but most of us don't know about. We don't know about it, but people like you, well, it's not you find them, but you go to them, don't you? And you show us.
Yeah, that's the whole point. Technically, I wasn't allowed to go, but because our tour guide is a local man with great influence, he got the head guard there to take me down into the Osirion, and I got to explore for half an hour. And then because the previous group had been there and left early because they paid a lot of money, then our whole tour group got to go down and explore for about 15 minutes until we were then kicked out.
Yeah, well, we appreciate that you take photographs and make videos and that you show us, because obviously most of us don't know about all those things, do we? You know, like they just look like three pyramids and then there's masses more stuff. But there are great big stones which go under the pyramids, aren't there, in some of it? On the ground, I mean. They go under the pyramids.
Yeah. Well, the latest thing we got to see was in March again, and the step pyramid at Saqqara, which is the first pyramid that the dynastic people built. It's way inferior to the Great Pyramid, but they've opened up the underground system there, so we were allowed to go down and physically into the subterranean aspect of the step pyramid. You walk for several hundred feet through this tunnel, and then you look down into the ground, and there's a very large granite box made of many giant slabs of stone that are there. And our guide, who was, I'll call him Mohammed because I don't want to give away his real name, but he had been under the whole complex, and he said there's a megalithic city underneath the step pyramid.
Wow. What does that mean then?
Well, that's probably why the dynastic people built on top of it as a commemoration of the much older civilization that they had discovered. So it's kind of like the giant boxes at the Serapeum at Saqqara. They're in two underground tunnels, rediscovered in the 19th century. Again, the archaeologists insist that they were built by the dynastic people, but some of them weigh 100 tons, and the stone was moved from Aswan, which is hundreds of miles away. So that theory goes out the window. Obviously, the dynastic people found them, and they crudely etched hieroglyphics on the surface of three of them. You can tell the quality difference because the hieroglyphs are very rough, like etching, shallow etching, yet the boxes themselves The boxes weigh up to 70 tons and the lids weigh 30 tons.
Mm. Does that mean that we have built on top of, like, the civilization was there and then we built on top of it? That's what must have happened, isn't it?
Yeah, basically. Well, even Zahi Hawass, who was the head of antiquities in Egypt, he stated that 85% of ancient Egypt is underground. Again, people keep saying it's under the sand, but it was physically built in a series of tunnel systems underground. So I'm hoping more and more of that will open up. As it looks like is happening. Every time I go, we get access to something that we haven't had access before.
But if they're tunnels and they're underground, was it that we were living underground and living on top of ground, or was it that something bad was happening here? This is why they built the pyramids for the civilization that was living underground.
It's all of those are possible. We just don't know. That's the great mystery that's been hidden from us. But as things are opened up and are revealed, it allows us to go and explore these things for ourselves.
Maria, is there any questions you want to, or anything you want to say to Brien?
Well, this is all very fascinating, all the new information that's coming out and everything that's about to be rediscovered. I mean, that's what I find so exciting, that there's all of this, it's underground cities that are likely to be discovered and hopefully opened up at some point to the general public. And even though it's not on the same scale as ancient Egypt, some of the sites here in the megalithic period were underground. And so you have some sites in Ireland, for example, called Oí na Gat, the Cave of Cats. And that's where you enter through what looks like a long barrow entrance, and you slide down, and then you go down 121 feet into the ground through a kind of series of tunnels, and then the whole monument opens up to about a 2-story building beneath the ground. And you can tell that the very hard sandstone was worked by ancient man in antiquity, because you've got linear lines going everywhere. But the archaeological explanation for that is it's a natural cave. But anyone with half a brain will see that that's worked stone. So I think some of the sites, even over here, were focusing on the kind of underground.
We can't hear you, Maria.
I said some of the sites over here were focusing on building underground as well, such as Oí na Gat in Ireland and Mine Howe in the Orkney stone megalithic complex.
Just going to ask Brien, like, you've got all these megalithic structures, you're looking in all South America, you're looking all that, but when you come to England, there's just as many here.
Well, there are lots, and of course, as Maria has said, so much of it has been destroyed over the course of time. So much of Lbry has been ruined, with stones being smashed up to be taken to build other buildings, or be put in farmers' fields and stuff like that. So, and the reconstruction of Stonehenge is a complete abomination, because they had no, as I said, they had no idea of its original design. So they decided to haphazardly put some of them back together, and others they haven't bothered. It's it's just an abomination what some people have done to sacred sites that belong to all of humanity.
I don't know why they destroyed them all, to be honest.
Well,
carry on.
Well, in quite a few cases in different countries, it's because the inheritors of the sites, if they wanted a source of stone, rather than going to quarry their own, they'd simply break up what they found, which is atrocious. But that's clearly what happened in Peru and Bolivia, and of course Egypt. All of Cairo. Cairo didn't exist until the Muslims showed up, and they tore lots of things apart in order to be able to build the mosques and things in the city of Cairo.
Does it have anything to do with, like, you know, like the Egyptians are into the underworld, aren't they? Is it anything to do with that? Under the ground?
Well, the difference is everything in dynastic Egypt is symbolic, like the afterlife and the this and the that. It's very much very much a spiritual culture. It seems like the original builders were just simply pragmatic. They were building these things to function doing something in the physical world. That's why you don't have any inscriptions or anything like that on most of the super ancient stuff, because it was form and function, not necessarily symbolic. So very different mindsets.
Yeah, it's hard to put it into how long ago. If you don't know how long ago things were, you can't work it out quite, can you? Because it's a bit difficult to test it all, isn't it? Because you're saying you don't know.
Well, that's why you have to just keep going back to these places and go with a group and bring people of different expertise with you. The guide we had in March is a phenomenal Egyptologist who's relatively young. He's read my books, so he knows that ancient Egypt goes far, far back, much farther back than the dynastic people, which he admitted that to me. Every day he would pull me off to the side and tell me intriguing local stories about different locations in terms of what has been actually found, but has been covered up by the Egyptology departments.
Yeah, we're living in a place where they like covering things up, don't they?
Yeah, that's for sure.
Amy, do you want to ask any questions? You got anything you'd like to know? Is Brian's here?
Well, it's all so fascinating to listen to. I guess what I just find amazing is these underground systems, then that they would build over the underground, and why people had to be underground, or if that's how it was, if I'm understanding it correctly. I just can't even imagine it, that there would be a whole network of underground, like tunnels and so forth. What was the reason? But I guess we'll never know. I just find it a fascinating concept. I mean, I wouldn't want to live underground personally, but they must have had some reason. But I guess we would never know until people did more further investigations. Is there things like this in North America? These types of structures anywhere in North America, like in the United States, though?
I don't think so, because North America was covered by like 2 miles of ice up until the end of the last ice age. It's
Mm-hmm.
unlikely that anything super profound is there.
Right.
That's why the locations we study are the real fascinating ones.
Yes.
I have watched videos where they're saying the Grand Canyon. They reckon that there are pyramids and things there. What's your take on that one then, Brian?
Well, I haven't seen any physical evidence. There are a lot of stories of people going into the Grand Canyon, discovering major Egyptian artifacts and stuff. Supposedly the area specifically where that is located is under the control of the military, so you're not allowed to go. So there's a lot of hearsay evidence about that kind of stuff, but I've never seen any photographs that have been authenticated.
Yeah.
Thank you for that then.
Yes.
Just asking, what's your favourite part of the archaeology then? Is it the elongated headed people or all the pyramids you go to see?
Oh, it's actually all of it.
You love it all.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, you can't study one specific thing too much, or else it gets kind of dull. So if you have different areas of interest that you can kind of bounce back and forth at, then when new evidence shows up, you follow that lead, and then when that kind of peters out, then you hope for another one to show up for you to look at.
So you just said that you could in a week's time go. Where was the place that you want to go? Are you going to go in a week's time then?
Well, the city of Cusco.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
there's some stuff there that I haven't seen before, and luckily I have two local experts that I've hooked up with now that we're allowed to go. Cusco was under quarantine up until I think a week ago or something, or 2 weeks ago. So now flights have resumed, and my friends who were not able to go anywhere are able to move around. So that's good. So in some ways, Peru is ahead of North America and Europe right now in terms of this whole COVID thing.
Yeah.
Everything's opening up. The cases are dropping. Peru went into super hard lockdown, I think March 19th or something like that. It took me 4 months to make it back to Peru.
Wow.
And so I've been here for 3 months, just waiting things out. And now things are opening up. Hoping to go in, looks like December.
So
Great.
that's your next place you're going then.
Well, I'm going to what's available, and in this area, Bolivia is completely open now. Their case level plummeted to almost nothing, so that's great. And
Yes.
I can only recently I've been restricted to more or less the town where I live for the last 3 months, with a little bit of maneuvering around. But now stuff is opening up, so. In Peru and Bolivia to some degree. All the tours, of course, have disappeared until next year because people
Aw.
are afraid to come to Peru, get trapped, and all this kind of thing. So, but those that are signing up, I'm assuring them by telling them that there will be no second wave in Peru.
Great.
So thank God.
Wow. Well, I just said we're going back into lockdown, so that's all a bit strange then, isn't it? But you and
I know.
Maria were going to do a tour together, weren't you? Are you
Well,
going to do that in the future?
yeah, I think we're set up for March of this coming year in Egypt. Also in Egypt, the cases have gone down to basically zero. So Egypt's doing very well.
Well, that's good then, because you kind of announced it on our hangout, didn't you? You asked Maria on one of our hangouts.
Yeah, that's true.
That's good for Maria then. Are you looking forward to that then, even if it's a year later, Maria?
I look forward to going to Egypt and learning more and looking at with more detail and wiser eyes each time I go there. So to go with Brien and Patricia and Susan, it's a team and they are all experts in their own field. So to be a part of that is great. It really is. And just to add to what Brien was saying about, Stonehenge is a bad reconstruction. It really is. But so is the heart of Avebury, because when the archaeologist Alexander Keeler found some of the stone holes at the center of the southern inner circle called Temple of the Sun, they were 2 meters long and quite deep. And they could not have housed those small stones that surrounded the very large obelisk stone, which was called obelisk stone by William Stukely in 1725. So when people go to Avebury and they see that, that is just what an archaeologist put up. They housed very large stones, as large stones as the southern inner circle itself. So it is annoying when we look at the reconstructions of some of the sites and they are misleading the general public into the actual true look of the site itself.
Yeah, I'm asking, like, how did they get these great big stones there? And Brien, like they're now saying that the pyramids in Egypt, for instance, the stones were poured and made there. Is that what you feel happened?
No, not at all. That's been debunked by every geologist that's been with us. So that's the problem with this whole idea of you know, that concept of pouring the stones like concrete is you have to have the capability of grinding the stone up in the first place, and that requires technology.
Do you
So
think that we
I don't.
were? Do you think that we've had a lot more technology and we're not? You think we've got technology now, but they had the technology in the past?
It's possible, but of course we're not utilizing in the general world now. If we do have it, it's all under secret projects or things like that. But another new a geologist or a team of geologists is that a lot of the stone that make up the Great Pyramid is not from the Giza Plateau, but from a quarry in Cairo. So that means every stone had to be brought across the Nile. That makes it even more of a complicated story.
Well, it does in a sense because you've got those great big stones at Avebury. So how do you think they got there then, Maria?
Theories abound that, you know, I mean, one model would say, for example, that the 100-ton or more central feature of the northern inner circle, the Neolithic most ancient feature of Avebury, whatever timeline you're using, that is the oldest stone setting. Then some archaeologists will say they were moved in the winter by oxen, but I mean, that's, you know, I don't know how they would do that. It's very difficult because when you look at the Valley of the Stones from whence Avebury came, because we now know there's a new source for Stonehenge westwards, for example, then they are really in the ground very deeply. So just to get a stone out of the ground is quite a feat in itself, let alone take it from all the way from the Valley of the Stones, which can be up to five or so miles away, completely downhill. You'd have to control that stone. So it is one of the mysteries of the ancient world, how they actually did that. It's all models. And sometimes they just use trees as rollers to move them. But when we look to a site like Callaniche, it's treeless, so you can't use that model there. So, you know, there's lots of different ideas out there, and nobody really knows for sure. We can just say models of what could have moved the stones.
Asking you, I think it's right with John Cowrie. He reckoned that Silbury Hill was one of the oldest pyramids in the world, didn't he?
One of his carbon datings that he took as an independent researcher when it was opened, and the archaeologist Josh Pollard, very famous for Avebury, took a sample. John's came out at 12,000 BC, and Josh Pollard and all, with Jim Leary, the mound expert, came out at 2,480 BC. And of course, that's very close to their magical, mythical number of 2,500 BC. So that was chosen. But I think John, as an independent researcher, paying for that carbon dating is pretty on the money.
So what does that mean then? Because in one sense, you can't go on Silbury anymore because the top collapsed and so forth. But until a few years ago, you could go on Silbury, you can walk around Avebury, but they've shut Stonehenge off. So what do you think that means then?
Well, in terms of visitors, Stonehenge is advertised by English Heritage, now Historic England, and you do get up to 500 visitors per hour in the peak tourist season of July walking around that monument. And it's a small confined space. Stonehenge is only 108 feet in diameter. Compare that to Avebury, which is 1,088 feet in diameter. So people can move around Avebury very differently than they can move around Stonehenge, for example. So unless you change the center of Stonehenge with things like erosion mats and a new surface level, then it's going to get far more erosion than somewhere like Avebury. So you do have to manage tourism with these ancient sites, but maybe in a different manner, with discussion and with groups, to see how we could open up Stonehenge a bit more.
Yeah, Brien, when you go round your sites, you know, in Peru and all those other places, do they have stone circles, or is that more akin to this side of the world?
Yeah, it's more akin to that side of the world.
What does that mean then, if we've got stone circles and there isn't any over your area?
It's just, I guess, the mindset of the builders. The mindset of those that were here was very different than those in England, and actually those in Egypt too.
Hmm. Do you find it, both of you, frustrating that we just do not have this proper sort of, what do you call it, like a catalogue or an understanding of how old these buildings are? Is it frustrating, or you don't look at it that way?
Well, I used to look at it that way. I'd get very frustrated about a lot of different things, but now all you have to do is you simply have to present what you find to the general public. You know, you don't go through the academic thing, through peer review or anything like that. Those are all worn out institutions. There's been way too much control of information for hundreds of years about who's allowed to learn this stuff. So when somebody opens the door and allows me to go through, I simply do that, hopefully with a camera in my hand.
What does that mean then, if they want to completely shut off our history so that we can't find out what's happened properly? What do you make of that then?
Well, they're losing their capability to do that because every cell phone has a high definition camera in it. So you get a lot of people who are able to record things that are supposedly prohibited or whatever. And in a country like Egypt, you know, they say it's illegal to do this, it's illegal to do that, but it depends upon who you know and how much influence they have. And if they're able to open a door for you, then you simply do that. You go through the door, you record what you have. For Egypt, you don't post anything while you're in the country because you can get into trouble, but that's why I just have a tendency of recording a lot of stuff when I'm there, and then when I get back to Peru, that's when I start making the videos, because there's no way they're going to be able to, if anyone wanted to, they'd have no ability to track me down.
Mm. That's quite amazing in itself. So when you're in Egypt, you can't put videos up, but you can when you leave the country. Amazing.
Yeah, well, that's what I've been warned about by people like Patricia, and also our new guide, Mohammed, again, who's a PhD candidate. He said the Egyptian authorities know who you are, Brien, and one little bad misstep and you can be destroyed by them. So that's what made me wake up to what's going on, and you know, it's kind of mildly scary to know that the authorities know who you are and what your Facebook is and all this kind of thing, but they can't, you know, once you leave the country, there's not anything they can really do. And we have to push against the standard academic story anyway, because none of us want to be lied to anymore. And that's what the population is waking up to.
Yes, there's many a video I myself over the years had watched about how they built the pyramids. And when you get to the end after watching all those videos, it never happened like that in the first place.
Well.
Yeah, so basically, back to the bit when you said about the stones weren't made there. So you reckon that they were cut and brought to the pyramids to make them?
Yeah,
Brien?
too many people are using the too many people are using this geopolymer idea. They're saying now that Pumapunku in Bolivia is geopolymer, that the pyramids in Egypt are geopolymer, that the pre-Inca stuff is all geopolymer. But again, if you bring a geologist with you like Susan can identify what the type of stone is and where it was quarried from. And that's, you know, the only person who knows that information is a geologist, not somebody who's making up some kind of theory about utilizing geopolymers.
So they had to be fairly, what do you call it, established then to be able to do these kind of things. They must have had some kind of technology to even make the pyramids. We don't make structures like those today, do we?
Yeah, well, again, that's where local influence is very useful. Um, the more people you know in the area that have some influence, then the more possibility there is that you're able to see things that the general public definitely uh, don't have access to, and B, wouldn't really care if they had access anyway, because they're not really that interested. Most people who are tourists to places like Egypt, they just want their photograph taken near the Sphinx or the Great Pyramid and post that on Instagram or something. They're not curious enough to be able to try to unravel the mysteries.
Do you think the same? Like one of the pyramids looks like the outer casing is taken off of it. Do you think that they took that to build with, or is it just it's supposed to look like that?
No, it looks like definitely all of the casings, almost all the casing stone, like 99% of the Great Pyramid is not there anymore. So that was used to construct Cairo. And most of the second pyramid's casing stone is gone. A lot of the upper part of the third pyramid, the casing stone is gone. So that would have been harvested and taken to Cairo, because there are a lot of blocks that are still at Giza where you can see where they were attempting to break them into pieces and more or less gave up, especially when it came to granite blocks.
But again, you know, like I just said to you, that there's these big stones, which not on all of it, because we went and looked on Google Earth one day. We went down, you know, as you're a person looking at the pyramids, you could see these great big slabs that went under some of the pyramids. I mean, they're enormous. How the hell did they get those there?
Well, that's part of the mystery.
Right, so your whole point is that you don't know everything like yourself, but you just like to show everybody what you see.
Yeah, I don't bother necessarily constructing theories about stuff. I present what I see, and the people have to use their brains if they want to really look at the evidence. It's very it's very compelling now. It's actually obvious that we're looking at very advanced ancient civilizations who had capabilities beyond our own, and more people are cluing into that as time goes on.
Some of those pictures you've been putting out, some of those buildings structures were quite weird.
Yeah, lots of them are.
I mean, there was like some that looked like they could have been dwellings. They were like, say, a stable. They're not a stable because they're all in stone, but they were quite long with windows in them. So they built into those. They were living in those structures, weren't they?
It depends where you go, but around the megalithic sites in Peru, somebody recently asked me, is there any evidence of like sleeping areas or bathrooms? And it's like, no. So that makes those locations very curious.
Wow. Is there anywhere that you would like to go that you haven't been, Brien?
I'd like to go to India at some point.
And what's there that you want to see there then?
Oh, some of the biggest megalithic stuff in the world is in India.
Right. That we don't really know about, you mean?
Well, again, you're just getting a standard timeline of, whatever, the Hindus built this 1,000 years ago or something, and it's like they didn't have the capability of it. We're talking huge chambers carved into the bedrock that go in hundreds of feet. It's like it's just not possible.
No, what about the one in Jordan? I can't remember what it's called right now, but it's got the big front on it, but it's all in stone, and they were managing to carve out these pillars in the stone, and then there's great big rooms in there, isn't there? All like marble and stuff like that. What's your take on that then?
Oh, you mean Petra?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, Petra's monumental. It's actually 12 kilometers long. Most people just see what's called the treasury, which was in Indiana Jones, and they think that's Petra. And it's like, no, you have to walk through this almost like cavern thing called the Seek for a mile to get to the treasury. And we had a local guide with us, and I said, how far does Petra go? And he said, 12 kilometers. So we walked all the way to the end. We didn't wind up seeing all of it, but you see these chamber after chamber, thousands of chambers. One of them we measured to be 300,000 cubic feet in size.
Do you have any idea what you think they were for then? They can't be just storage, can they?
No, that's, again, it's a very puzzling place, but there's definite evidence of machining technology because we see the tool marks on the ceilings and the walls. And it had to have been very advanced machining, not somebody with a bunch of chisels.
No, I think that's a hard thing for us all to grasp, isn't it? That these civilizations were probably a lot more advanced than we are now, rather.
Yeah.
Do you feel the same, Maria? Do you feel it's like Brien says?
Well, yes, I think we're just scratching the surface, really, to uncover what the ancient civilizations, who they were, why they were building these things, the fundamental questions that, need to be addressed, and that's what really keeps me going, is to solve the mystery of it all. So I do look at the ancient sites, across the world, and try to understand about the people that built them, and try to get we can't ever get into their mindsets, but we can explore different options. And that's where I think alternative researchers do very well. They explore those different options rather than looking for the standard interpretation. And like Brien points out, you can see tooling marks. You can see advanced ways of how these structures were in about 5 or so minutes, Karen and Brien and Amy, I'm going to have to depart. But so I just thought I'd say that rather than just exiting.
Brien, do you want to stay on for a little bit longer, or would you like to? We've been going for just over an hour. Would you like to finish and we could say goodbye to each other all together? Is that all right? Or do you want to carry on for a bit longer, Brien?
No, I think I'll go when Maria goes, thanks.
Okay, well,
yeah, sorry about that then.
Okay, no, it's been brilliant. People listen for a certain amount of time. Do you want to finish what you're saying, Maria, and then we'll say goodbye afterwards? Stop the hangout.
Well, I'm looking forward to going to Egypt with Brien, Patricia and Susan, an expert team, in March, and to also explore Malta with Brien. So that's something that we're really looking for. And like Brien says, in certain countries, they're doing very well with the COVID situation. So I think it, and also it's what Patricia pointed out on one Facebook post, and I think we need to listen to this because it's a wonder in itself. You will have less people there, and you will have some of the monuments very much to yourself to really look closely and to put your own ideas onto what's going on. So with less people there, you may even have a better experience.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good thing then, isn't it, Brien? Less people there.
Well, unfortunately, it means that the Egyptian people are going to be desperate to sell you things, but we go there. We go there once a year because we want to support the Egyptian people and promote the return of tourists back. I think Patricia's just going back to Egypt. She was in the U.S. for a few weeks, but she's going back, and she's assured me that there will be no resurgence of this stupid thing that's been going on for way too long now. This control mechanism, and so there will probably be very few people there, which will make access much more intriguing. And what I'm hoping is that this will be the last time that Egypt has had to suffer from something awful happening to it, because before this, of course, it was terrorism, etc. So I'm eager to go back and support the Egyptian people and hopefully be able to get access to other places I haven't been to. And the great thing about this team that we've built is, Susan, the geologist, Patricia is heavily involved in metaphysics. Mohammed is an expert, open-minded Egyptologist. Maria is an expert on earth energies and things like that. And I have to start focusing my attention away from just looking at megalithic stuff, because that's kind of limited. But if you can integrate these other disciplines, then that makes the story far more fascinating. So it's you know, the future looks very bright. We just have to soldier on.
Can I ask you a question? I know that we're going to be finishing in a moment, but what's the pull to Malta then? Because Maria mentioned Malta, so why are you going to Malta?
Well, there's one site called the Hypogeum, which is a subterranean structure, and it appears to be hyper ancient. There's a lot of stuff on Malta, which is pretty small, but I'll be intrigued to go. I went to Turkey for the first time about a year ago, and there's so much stuff in Turkey which they cannot possibly explain, like the subterranean cities and things like that. So I'm sure Malta will be very fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, it's been an absolutely amazing hangout. Thank you so much for your time. So thank you, Amy. Thank you, Maria. And thank you, Brien and Chapman.
Thank you. Brilliant.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, ladies.
No,
Don't go, Brien. We'll say goodbye when I'm just going to stop the recording, but we'll say goodbye afterwards. Anyway, for the recording, we're finishing now. Thank you so much.